sports updates, ticket giveaways, show highlights. Follow at KFAN 1003 on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X today.
Told LeBron to bring your ass. DeChambeau stomping on grass. Exploding diarrhea from Taco Bell. I'll pass. Wolves in 5. That's pretty good.
Topical.
No question. Covers everything, doesn't it?
All
That's Kyle
topical. From
lovely Isanti. That was fun with Coomer, wasn't it?
He's the best, man.
How good was that Kirby Puckett story? I don't know if I'd heard that one before. The Suits story?
You wonder if that stuff still happens, because now everybody makes huge money.
Good question.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's the Puckett story about the guy that got his first paycheck, and it was at his locker. I can't remember who that was. And Puck said, "Oh, is that your first paycheck?" And the guy said, "Yeah." And he pulled out like a big wad of cash and said, "Do you want me to cash it for you?" His Puckett, was walking around money. It was probably $10,000. Who knew?
Yes.
Like Kobe talked about that, or somebody talked about that with Kobe Bryant, a rookie on the court. He got set up at some restaurant, and Kobe paid for the whole thing. Like that's just badass, old school story. 3 suits in his, and I know that hotel, the Grand Central Hyatt.
I have stayed there many times.
Yeah, good place.
Yeah, it's a very good place. Yeah,
get on the train right there. It's perfect.
It's outstanding.
Close to Bryant Park.
Can you hit the breaking news sounder?
Hang on.
I had something else set up, but I got to go to breaking news. No, it's not LeBron related. Sorry. I wouldn't even, the breaking news sounder wouldn't be momentous enough.
You're right.
For the LeBrobo news.
I'd have to make it open.
You almost would. That's very, very true, Davey. This is via NFL.com, so that means it's pretty official, right?
Should be, yeah, depending on what it is.
You know about this suspension? The NFL...
Oh, the Cardinals guy.
Yes, has suspended Cardinals personnel executive, Ryan Gold indefinitely for violating the league's gambling policy. The league said today that its investigation determined that Gold provided confidential, non-public inside information regarding 2026 draft selections by the Cardinals before the picks were announced.
What the hell's going on out here?
And Gold also participated in parlay bets on NFL and college games. The league didn't say who Gold had provided with the information. That's a little, I can't say any more that I'm surprised.
Right.
But here's the reminder. The tentacles of the gambling proliferation, I don't even think we understood how deep it was going to go, where it might end up affecting teams. I mean, I didn't have this one on my bingo card. You might have somebody leaking early information to win a bet on who the team is going to pick.
Exactly right.
It's remarkable. So, that's going to be a big story over the weekend as we get more details about it. And as I assume there's going to be some pretty good hard reporting on that as well. But that's in of itself pretty ominous. And again, you could say, well, it's basically just the new normal. But it is, if these accusations are accurate, it's devastating and damaging as well. And you're back to, this league is so big, nothing is going to stop people from watching it. But every time we have one of these stories, and whatever the sport is that's involved, and we've had several related to pro basketball, it does have an impact. And frankly, it's part of what fuels conspiracy theories in the first place, right? Is it, maybe there's more to that story, or maybe that was a setup, or whatever the case may be. Especially in this case, when you're talking about an insider, a team executive involved in this.
And again, it goes to, it's not, are the Cardinals going to win or lose a game?
No.
It's these props that we talk about. And the fact that you can apparently trade and bet on draft picks.
On draft picks, exactly.
And selections. It's one of those sneaky little things. Like, why we need to bet on that, God only knows. But someone's going to find a way to exploit it, and he apparently did.
What will be interesting to me is, will this be another case where suddenly there was a lot of action, and so one of these sites regarding money placed on the Cardinals are going to draft so and so?
Had to have been,
and that triggered something.
Yep.
That indeed then started an investigation. And this guy, I think he looks young, but he's been around. I think he's been with the team.
13 years.
Yeah, 13 years. That's what I thought. I knew it was over 10. And then, of course, that leads to speculation. Well, I mean, there's mention in the piece that the fact that he participated in parlay bets on NFL and college games, and you're back to inside information he has regarding, I don't know if this includes the Cardinals or not, but inside information he might even have involving other teams. And more importantly, was he in the hole a bunch of money in a way that then big shots come to him and say, you want to get out of this, you're going to help us, you're going to help tell us who you guys are going to take in the second round of the 2026 National Football League draft.
That's how it works sometimes.
Man,
yeah.
That's not good. Bonus bucks today?
We do, yes. TheFan@BigDeck.com. Want to give you a shot to win bonus bucks. The 4 o'clock keyword is new. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword new.
You're listening to Barrero.
Got your chance at top-tier tickets from John Mulaney to the Smashing Pumpkins, My Chemical Romance, and more. You can enter at KFAN.com, keyword contests.
If Guardsy makes a LeBron Open, we'll be ready by Christmas. Wow.
Christmas Day game.
That's a callback shot.
I'm motivated now.
In all honesty, I mentioned earlier that teams are willing to wait if they have to, if they're going to get them. But the league might not be. There has been very frontal commentary from the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, Adam Silver, who basically said, we're holding up the schedule, obviously, especially the national schedule, to find out who LeBron's going to hang with, because we're not stupid. We're going to include that in the mix. It's going to have an impact, so we would like him to get to this fairly soon. I think the only comment LeBron made today was, well, I'm not going to make you wait much longer, which is still fairly vague. Mm-hmm. So the assumption originally was this was the week. Now the new assumption is it's going to be early next week. What form it comes in, nobody seems to know. But again, nothing. At this point, very little would surprise me either way, correct?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be stunned if it does get, for whatever reason, extended even longer. And, there's new momentum on Golden State. I thought that was probably going to be where, because he doesn't want to leave, logically he would rather not leave California. I don't think he's got much of a chance to win a championship there if that's the deal. If it's, I'll just love playing with Steph, you can do that. I thought Miami was the most natural fit in terms of combining location that would interest him and team, because I do think they have a chance to be pretty good with him. Now, again, they gutted the roster a little bit to get Giannis, but nevertheless, they still have Bam, and that's a pretty interesting quote unquote big three there, where he's got a lot of help defensively too. So we'll see where that indeed goes.
There's also the thought that even though the East is getting better, and the NBA champion just came out of the East,
that makes
it isn't the gauntlet that the West is.
It still isn't.
It's still not, as much as some of those other teams have improved and look like they're trending in the right direction.
Yes.
It's still not. You're still not dealing with the Spurs, OKC, Denver, obviously the Wolves, and whatever form they take. So that would be, he went to 8 straight finals coming out of the East.
That's true. 763 guy writes, it was Mike Trombley, Guardsy.
That sounds right.
Is that who you're thinking of?
Yeah, the Puckett story where he offered to cash his first big league paycheck on the spot in the clubhouse. That's so good. Remember Ricky Henderson? He didn't cash. He got like $1 million check.
That's true.
And the bean counter of the A's said, hey, what's going on? He's like, well, I hung it up. I didn't want to cash it. It's hanging in my office. Like, we need you to cash it, but he didn't need to. He had so much money.
Well, there was I don't think I was making quite as much as him, but there was a story in fan lore. Common had a lot of fun with this decades ago, where I was going through a drawer at of my desk at the Star Tribune, and I found an uncashed paycheck from 3 months before that I didn't even notice it was there. Hey, pretty good gig if you can get it. So these things do happen from time to time. Coom Dog is one of us. Yeah, I mean, in a way he is, even though he wasn't born here.
Right.
But he kind of looks like it. I didn't get to Michael Bush. I know people wanted me to. There were a lot of other good
didn't we do that last
questions.
year?
I think we did.
We did.
And obviously a lot has changed since then. But if we could have gone longer with him, I would have. And we'll just try to make sure we get him a couple more times before the baseball season is over. Are you familiar with Operation Stormwall? I've
only
teased
because
it
of you
10 times. I'm finally, and maybe I've built it up too much, and maybe people will be disappointed, but it fascinates me because the story I'm looking at, it almost does sound like it comes out of a science fiction motion picture. So here's the premise that connects to Operation Stormwall. Christopher Mims wrote this story, Wall Street Journal, about a week and a half ago. It's the year 2040, and the big one, a civilization-smashing solar storm of a scale not seen since the 19th century is on a collision course with Earth. Now, that gets your attention, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm sitting up.
Far out in space, where geostationary satellites orbit, a half dozen school bus-sized satellites crack open and start dumping barium, lithium, or sodium. Within minutes, sunlight transforms this material into an ionized gas shield that slows the oncoming massive blob of plasma. Down on our planet's surface, a would-be global catastrophe, potentially knocking out entire electrical grids, is reduced to a nighttime display for anyone who cares to look up and see the Northern Lights. Even its name, Stormwall, sounds like science fiction, but authorities on space weather say it could work, mitigating an event that happens, they estimate, about once a century. And the trio of scientists who conceived of it say an international coalition could build such a system with existing or soon-to-arrive technology. Now, they do mention that this project, Operation Stormwall, could cost tens of billions of dollars.
Well, see you later.
With all the electronics on Earth that increasingly govern our lives and ever more infrastructure being put into orbit, from internet delivering satellites to AI training data centers, spending that much could be a no-brainer, says Stormwall co-designer Brian Walsh, an associate professor of engineering at Boston University. A 100-year solar storm could cause huge power outages over entire continents. If the cost is less than sending people to the moon, and people do the math, it will make sense in the very near future. I didn't even know these things existed before.
No.
Have you ever heard of solar storms?
I think I've heard
Maybe
of
I've
that.
heard of solar storms,
Yeah,
but
I don't know what they are, really.
So here's the question, though. Once a century they hit, when's the last big one, and how much damage did it do? That's what I'm wondering. Is this real, or is this a new form of solar weather terrorism, I guess I would say? I need some of our scientists to get in on some of this. According to this story, the last really disruptive solar event was March 1989, which knocked out Quebec's power grid for 9 hours. See, I don't think that's enough to convince people to say, yeah, let's spend tens of billions of dollars.
We got to stop this thing.
We got to stop a 9-hour outage in one province of Canada.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Now, maybe we set things up differently so that we're more prone to that, or there be more damage done because of the way the technology has advanced since then. Because I like the story. I like it as, like I said, a science fiction movie. But I'm not sure. I mean, to me, you got to have evidence of, well, yes, 2 or 3 civilizations were wiped out.
Exactly.
Not the whole Earth, but 2 or 3 civilizations, and then it might be worth all the trouble. So any of our scientists out there have any knowledge of this? This was the story I meant to get to with Ian Leonard. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to, again, in fairness, hit him cold because he might not necessarily have read this story he is as knowledgeable as he is. He might not have had much, to come back on regarding this one. So booth at KFAN.com. That's the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN inbox 64686. Dan Minnesota writes, looking forward to the Solnami naming. The Solnami naming. The last one set telegraph wires on fire.
Oh, that's no good.
So now the new experiment allegedly on the mic. See if this sounds, how far can I get away? Does this sound any better or any less hollow? Or does it sound about the same?
Well, here's the thing. In my ears, it never really sounds that bad.
Okay.
It could be because I'm deaf. I've been in here for 25 years.
That's definitely part of my problem.
Yes, so I don't always know. I'm not the best
we'll
test case. But if you're back, sources close to the situation, Chris Hockey texted me yesterday and said when he had Corey back off about an inch or two from the mic, it seemed to fix a little bit of the tinny, echoey problem.
How about if I do it if I speak to it from the side? I don't think that does.
But now you're talking like Jim Nance, like you're on hole 18. Bryson DeChambeau.
Yeah, that won't work.
May have matted down the grass.
We'll
it's a 2-stroke penalty.
I think now some people, it's in people's heads that it's worse than it actually is. But that's how things get started here. At least people care. I give them credit for that, and we want to make the listening, experience as pleasurable as it could possibly be. Next segment might not be pleasurable to all members of the audience, but duty calls. Fact and fiction. Let's come back and talk some A section. Let's break down the president's speech last night that some networks carried and a bunch did not, at least not live, although they all commented and reported on it. That's coming up next.
This is
President spoke last night. I think it was 8 o'clock Central. It started just about that. A lot of the, CNN did not run it live. Pretty sure Fox did. I don't think MSNBC did. The networks didn't. CNN reported on it after the fact. We can get into that debate again when a president speaks. What should the rules be on that? I tend to lean towards you put it on. And then you vet, you discuss, etc. For some people, that's considered too quote-unquote dangerous. But let's leave aside that debate for another day. Let's get to whether the president delivered the goods, so to speak. And I'm going to quote from two pieces, one from a lefty site and one from a righty site as well. The first is from the Atlantic, although what I like about the Atlantic is we've quoted them on a number of controversial stories that in which they've shown the willingness and ability to challenge, one could say, the Jets, the Dems, the DFLers, so to speak, here in Minnesota. Let me read you a couple of nuggets here. During the president's first term, U.S. intelligence analysts reported that Chinese intelligence had analyzed, quote, election voter registration data, unquote, from multiple states. Former U.S. officials told us they were aware that China was stealing or otherwise acquiring voter registration data, which might include a person's name, address, and political party. Those kinds of data are often publicly available online. China's harvesting of voter registration information is not news. It was spelled out in an intelligence estimate, or I should say assessment, of the 2020 election presented to Trump and his senior advisors, then declassified and released publicly after he left office. Here's the key section. That assessment was unequivocal on the consequences of foreign intervention, including by Russia and Iran. We have no indications that any foreign actor attempted to interfere in the 2020 U.S. elections by altering any technical aspect of the voting process, including voter registration, ballot casting, vote tabulation, or reporting results, which to me says not good that this influence is going on, but nothing stolen, which, let's face it, that's the whole impetus of why Trump wanted to speak to the country last night. In fact, in the Atlantic piece, None of this is to say that China's harvesting of American voter data is benign. As U.S. officials reported in 2020, it was part of an effort by China to predict electoral outcomes and to inform its efforts to influence U.S. policy towards China under either election outcome. And it is true that U.S. law enforcement and intelligence officials and cybersecurity experts have acknowledged for years that China has pursued aggressive and wide-ranging efforts to collect personally identifying information and other data about American citizens. The reason there, the goal, officials say, more to strengthen China's geopolitical position by collecting as much data as possible that can be used then for espionage purposes as well. Let me get to a piece from the righty side of the aisle via the Dispatch that I think kind of persuasively lays out the point that there's just not much there in what, in fact, there's maybe less than meets the eye, and that, ironically, a number of the documents that were released in conjunction with this speech tend to contradict some of the most serious allegations and claims that Trump very bombastically laid out there via the teleprompter. And this has to do with, let's start with this premise, which I think is very important. And it's ironic because in this case, the Republicans under Trump are asking for more almost national oversight and a sort of a national universal approach when it comes to our whole voting process. And a number of people have pointed out what is pointed out in this piece, that the fact that it's as regionalized or even put together state by state actually works in our favor if your concern is voter elections being stolen. Here's what the writer writes here. U.S. elections, unlike many European countries, are largely governed by state law and administered in more than 9,000 local jurisdictions. That's usually counties. So there is no election mothership that can be hacked to corrupt the elections in the entire country. Each state has its own set of rules, its own election equipment, unconnected to other states. They also note in this piece, the Dispatch, that about 98% of Americans vote with a paper ballot. Majority of U.S. voters hand mark a paper ballot. Other American voters, about 26%, make their choices on digital touchscreen that then prints a paper ballot to be verified by the voter and read by the tabulator. Paper ballots are unhackable, digitally immutable, and auditable. The security community loves them. So, in this case, the president tends to ignore all of this, talking about our election infrastructure, including electronic voting machines and ballot counting systems, are dishonest, almost all vulnerable, and easily compromised. That gets back to the documents released at the new White House website, Vulnerabilities in Electronic Voting and Ballot Counting Systems. One document is called Foreign Threats to 2020 Federal Elections. This was produced by the National Intelligence Council on August 19, 2020. This is one of the documents that was just released. Here's the nut graph, as we say in the business. It probably would be difficult to coordinate a campaign to alter voting results on a wide scale. Post-election audits and paper trails also most likely would uncover such efforts in the nearly all U.S. states. That's poorly written, but that's how it's written in the report. Similarly, foreign actors would have difficulty coordinating a large-scale campaign to manipulate mail-in voting, and robust postal tracking probably would detect any large-scale effort. Same website released this document from January 15, 2020, under Vulnerabilities in U.S. Election to 2020 Election Infrastructure. We assessed that vote tabulation systems would be difficult to manipulate on a wide enough scale to compromise election results. The systems in each voting location are not connected to the internet or to each other, and many methods for exploiting them rely on physical proximity. In addition, that same document talked about the greater threat to be wholly fabricated claims, such as announcing that adversaries have compromised all U.S. voting machines. A claim that would be difficult and time-consuming or impossible for the U.S. to disprove. So they're saying that's the real danger. Somebody throws out what Trump has thrown out over and over again. They're saying that's the danger because it would be difficult or maybe even impossible to disprove it, which is very different than saying that it was happening or that it was indeed true. How about the vulnerability of systems connected to the internet? Election office websites, voter registration info. Same thing. Successful attacks on those systems could force voters to use provisional ballots or cause delays, but the reports do not in any way give any credence to flipped votes, counterfeit ballots, phantom voters, or any of the other theories that Trump and his election deniers and skeptics have tended to go with. In fact, the documents released, again, by this White House can be further read as a celebration of the progress election offices have made in the lead up to the 2020 election. Direct recording electronic machines, which record and process votes digitally and store tabulation data in removable memory, are particularly vulnerable to cyber operations. Such machines, however, are used far less than other, more secure types of voting machines. And in the years before November 2020, a number of states, including Georgia, switched from direct recording electronic machines to election systems with paper ballots. Only Louisiana continues to make heavy use of paperless systems. Then there's the other big claim that the Department of Homeland Security has identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections. What sort of documentation, what reports are quoted and cited there? Well, there's one document. It's one page, undated, from the Department of Homeland Security, and it reads as follows. Over 250,000 non-citizens are illegally registered to vote in just the 4 states for which public data files have been reviewed, and that state election officials in California, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Nevada have been notified of this serious threat to national security, and the DHS stands ready to support their efforts to identify and remove intelligible restraints. Or I should say ineligible registrants. There is no discussion of the methodology, no theory of how this is done, and really no explanation for how DHS identified those 4 states, especially when they did not get cooperation, one could say, from those states. It's also worth noting, as they do in this piece, that Trump's claim was about registrants, not voters. In fact, that means they may not have ever voted. And there was even, I think this was in the in the state of Utah, for example, there was a recent citizenship audit done by that state. They ended up filing a 27-page report of its process and conclusions. And what they found was that of more than 2 million registered voters, Utah did indeed find 27 confirmed non-citizens, 12 who actually voted in the November 2020 election. Michigan, recent audit of Macomb County's some 725,000 registered voters, it found 4 apparent non-citizens on their voter rolls, including the one who voted. They note, as we did yesterday, ever since Trump has entered politics, he's alleged stolen elections. When he lost to Ted Cruz in the 2010 Iowa caucus, as we noted as recently as yesterday's show, he claimed widespread fraud. He claimed fraud in his 2016 victory against Clinton, and he claimed massive fraud in the 2020 election. Now, I'll say again, some of these vulnerabilities are legit. They are concerning. They should be investigated. But he didn't deliver on his very dramatic and grand pronouncements about what he thought was the soft underbelly of our entire election process. And again, some of the documents that the White House, that's directly related to, from a timing standpoint, that speech being given last night, not only don't support his conclusions, they contradict his obvious conclusions, which is, even though he didn't talk a lot about stolen elections, let's face it, that's what this whole thing is about. And, we had a texter yesterday make a point that was fair about when it comes to the issue of influencing elections. And anybody who listens to this show then can corroborate this. I can't prove it at this moment because I would have to go back in the archives, but I remember it. When Hillary Clinton lost, there was a lot of talk about Russian interference. She used that often.
Endlessly, it felt like.
As an alibi and an excuse. I ripped it early. I ripped it late. I ripped it in the middle. It was too convenient. It left out so much about her campaign and about her strategy. And that doesn't mean that there wasn't some of it taking place, because I think we always assume there's influence. But influence is a very different thing than you're reversing elections or stealing votes. And if this was the best that the president could deliver, he didn't deliver it in any meaningful way, shape, or form. Also on the, 250,000 non-citizens registered. Again, even the president was careful about saying, I didn't say they voted, because that number would not necessarily be the same as if you're registered. A couple people have noted a belief that when they've looked at the grid, the charts that were sent out that came up with this number, that he's including, that what the president is including in many of these states is deceased individuals, which is a completely different category, obviously, as being still registered. No information on whether dead people were voting, which allegedly happened in 1960 in the greater Chicagoland area and the state of Illinois to help John F. Kennedy knock off Richard Milhouse Nixon. That's another story for another day. But that, in fact, those numbers get you much closer to the 250,000, and that if you just isolate the numbers that do not include the deceased individuals who stayed on the rolls, that it's not even close to approaching that particular number. So that's the best I can do with it. As I said, I quoted purposefully here from one, I guess if you want to classify The Atlantic as overall, has a left-wing bent. It does, even though I give them credit for trying to go Bill Maher on the bit on a number of important topics, but also on a definite right-of-center writer, in particular for a right-of-center website, who tried to very systematically, emotionally, dramatically, just go through the allegations and go through, in some cases, they said, the documents that the Trump administration offered up, and it just doesn't add up. There's just not that much there. I mentioned this also, the other challenge, we talked about this on Enough Said, which I think is going to be on like at about midnight on Fox 9.
11:30.
11:30.
Yep.
And then even later on Fox 9 Plus, is that Trump is his own worst enemy here, in that, let's say the evidence he revealed last night was smoking gun stuff, was like, whoa. Well, he's got a challenge in that, because he has been so obsessed with this issue in so many ways, on so many levels, there's, I guess you could say, stolen election fatigue that sets in, where people go, oh, here he comes again. So that even if you have something, people are going to be more skeptical about it because you've come at it so many times before. And they're going to say, it's the old Chicken Little thing, I think, right? And That's another part of the battle, because there should be the ability, no matter who is issuing the claims, no matter that history, to say, all right, let's look. Our job is to still sift through this stuff and analyze it, and there may be still stuff to sift through, and if there is, we'll get to it. But on the basis of what we've had so far, you still should try to examine it. But on that basis, they're just the stuff that he has certainly alleged before is very different than this, which would indicate concern about influence, yet also a lot of that we already knew. A lot of that was already out there. Even what China, grabbing those roles, that doesn't prove that they were manipulating votes. It doesn't prove that they stole those votes. There's nothing in here about any of that. It has to do with this stuff is actually publicly available. Now, they probably shouldn't have it, and we should probably try to do something about it if we can. But a lot of this stuff is publicly available to people, and so whatever they're doing with it, there's not even any allegation that there's your smoking gun that proves that elections were indeed stolen. So that's the best I can come up with at this particular point. I'm sure we'll, in the next many weeks, continue to come back to the story, because he's going to continue to come back to the story. He's going to claim that people aren't being fair with what he laid out. But look in the mirror, man, or get mad at the people who are working for that group that's supposed to spearhead this whole concept, because the stuff they're sending out as see this and see this, in many cases doesn't support the conclusions, and even in a few cases contradicts them as well. Top 5?
Speaking of cheating, did Bryson DeChambeau cheat in the British Open? The RNA thinks he did. We'll give you details.
You're listening to Barrero on the Fan.
From the 1-800